we back on the cast again.
Crazy, man. Y'all watched all them episodes.
And if not, y'all better go back to watch all of them episodes. We put a lot of time into those episodes. But today we are talking about misconceptions about marriage. So what marriage looks like, or what you think marriage is, and what it is not.
All of that.
So first, I feel like we just gotta go ahead and cut to the chase. Like, marriage is not social media. It's not cute all the time. You're not gonna like your spouse all the time. You gonna love them. But like them is a different thing. Like when I tell my husband, like, I really like you, that's a huge compliment.
I appreciate that, babe.
I do like you, but I just think that a lot of people think marriage is supposed to be a fix-all for problems, when actually more of your problems get exposed once you have your spouse.
You start to find out, like, man, like the person that I've, had these googly eyes over and everything, like, hey, you kind of get on my nerves a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, marriage, to our first point, is really a mirror, and you should take it as such. Like, you should always be looking at the mirror that God has ordained to reflect yourself. And a lot of times I find myself looking at Dondre, and like, if he is maybe acting a certain way and it starts to get on my nerves, I'm like, hang on, time out. When do I act like that? Or when do I need grace in these situations? What I will say about our marriage, I feel like God does this kind of tag team thing where if I do something that gets on your nerves and like you react a certain way, He'll allow you to do the same thing so that he can be like, okay, so how you gonna act? For example, I remember a big project or whatever we were working on, and I had uploaded the wrong version of the video without a title. I went back to ask him to fix. So I had uploaded it, and then he came into the room and he was like, babe, like I spent a lot of time doing that. Like, you reacted.
I definitely reacted. It was a formatting thing. I was like, oh, I cropped it to fit vertically so that on every different type of cell phone, it would have the same exact look. Knowing that there's things that we have to go in order and check through and all of that. The fact that that was something, I was like, bro, I told you to upload the right one.
To my point, the very next week, so I uploaded that, right? He reacted how he reacted, came back and apologized, and I was like, thank you. The very next week, we were supposed to shoot our first episode of On Our Way. What happened, Andre? We shot an hour's worth of content.
Feeling good, it was happy, all of that. Apparently, and this is something that has never happened before, all of a sudden, this camera, it had a 30-minute timeout.
Yes.
So after 30 minutes, it needed to take at least like a 5-minute break to cool. It had never done that before, but it happened.
And then the next week, we go to record the same episode. The audio, he forgot to check the audio. We did a great first episode of the podcast without any audio. So now it's like, okay, this is a mirror that we had to look at. You needed to give me grace for my upload. I needed to give you grace as well for stuff happening. A few times in a row, but in that moment, I think that was a beautiful lesson to learn. Like, we always will need the same grace that we give each other.
Oh, always. Bro, that made the hair on my neck stand up.
I was so
Because we were
mad.
And then as I'm walking to the camera, I can see her in the background, eyes just piercing me, because she like, you be getting on me about stuff.
Yes.
And now I'm ready to get on you, but God telling me to give you grace. I'm like, okay, I get it. And so ever since then, when it comes to anything, like especially like our shoots and stuff, whether it's for On Our Way or our company, like we over communicate. Like, we be like, hey, you got that? You got that cable?
let's check this. Let's do one last audio. Let's get up and check it.
Hey, I'm plugging this cable in. You watching me?
Right.
Like, we be sitting there going back and forth.
I am so glad that we did that and we took that time to look at the mirror in front of us and said, hey, when people have shortcomings, how do you treat them? And really it's a reflection of how we treated ourselves. We didn't give ourselves much grace, so there was no grace for the other person. But now we're like, okay, I need to give myself grace. I need to give this other person grace because, you know, we're all learning together. So that was a good lesson.
Cool it. Take a moment and think about all of the other situations in life where that happens.
Yeah.
Cool it. Like, take the time back. It's not as serious as you may make it. But when it's something personal to you, it's like, no, it needs to be right. Like, God will humble you in that same breath.
Yeah, he will.
And get you to see it from the other perspective.
And that literally brings us to our next point. I'm gonna just say how my therapist said it. When somebody makes you mad, it has everything to do with you and nothing to do with them. It is something that triggered you. He said you need to go back and map, like, when did I first feel this feeling? Whether it was inadequacy or whether it was people not seeing your character properly or how you want them to see it. And now this situation is reminding you of the very first time you felt that feeling. Now you're triggered. Now you go into survival mode.
Definitely. I've ran into that many times. I'll think back to that one problem, and the minute I see something that sounds like that, I'm jumping, I'm snapping on it. So in a relationship, guys, think about when she says something to you and it sounds like something that old girl said.
Yeah.
Now you ready to snap, or it's something your mom used to say or your dad or whatever, like that may be a character flaw that you are insecure about. That could cause, that's that same situation. It causes you to revert back to that trauma response from episode 1.
Absolutely. And as for the lady, we can hear something that makes us feel maybe less confident going into spaces, or the way we look, or when we get constructive criticism, it sounds like, oh, I'm not doing enough and I'm just the worst. But that's not what they're saying. This is someone who loves me, and if they're bringing constructive criticism or just telling me something like, why am I so emotional in my response, and why can't I handle someone telling me about myself? Because everybody in life needs somebody to tell them about themselves, and that has permission to do that with the good things and the bad things.
Good things and bad, and sometimes it can be a trigger to have someone bad tell you about yourself. It could be the same exact stuff that someone that you love or consider to be good tell you. Like, that's again where you have to mentally check yourself, like, you know what? I may not like the person that's telling me, but that doesn't mean the information ain't valid.
Correct. The next point we had to learn is that if something is bad for your spouse, it's bad for the marriage. That means people, places, and things. Heavy on the people, because I know that we have had situations where one of us is seeing only the good in someone. The other person has discernment and is like, hey, this is an issue, this is an issue. But the other person is only like, no, it's not. What are you talking about? And then finally we come to realize, oh yeah, you were right about that. I'm sorry, I was only seeing with my rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, and it takes it because that person or that experience that you're feeding into, like, it's going to come to a head because you are going against the covenant. If it's a relationship that my spouse is seeing like, hey, I don't think that that's benefiting you.
Right.
I don't think that that's healthy for you, you know, just evaluate it. I'm not gonna tell you what to do.
Right.
Like, we've always had that type of vibe, and we never want to force someone to do something.
Correct.
Even with outside of our marriage and within our marriage. Like,
I'm not forcing you to do anything you don't want to do. I don't have dominion over you like that.
Yeah, but I think just dialing it back and actually getting your spouse to see it, because it can be friendships, it can be coworkers,
family,
family, all of that stuff. And you have to really evaluate, like, okay, my spouse is telling me one thing versus another. Now, there are people who purposefully manipulate you,
of course,
as a significant other, but again, this comes through that vetting process,
right.
You know, seeking out authorized users for your relationship, This is not just a conversation between your spouse like, hey, I don't think that person is for you like they claim they are. Like, I can give them a chance to show you, but you also need to go to therapy to also check. Like, we got to have checks and balances within it. So it's not like I'm just telling you something and that's it. Like, hey, let's go to therapy, let's confirm this.
And even to add on to that, therapy and even friends, because sometimes your friends, your trusted core group of friends, for me, it's only a few, but your trusted core group of friends, maybe they also saw something and they were just like, well, I wasn't gonna say nothing, but since the cat is out of the bag, here we go, boom, boom. And now you have people confirming what your spouse is saying. And I also think that's why you marry a spouse with good discernment as well. I know that if Dondre tells me that something ain't right, that his discernment is strong. So if something ain't right, I need to be praying about it, even if I don't, immediately act on that action. It's something I need to be on high alert about, and it's something I need to pray about because he sees something that I don't. And since we're one, I got your front, you got my back.
So within that, without speaking too much on it, with us going through something like that and me having discernment over something like that, in the end, how did that work out for you as being that spouse that had to say like, okay, I got to reroute in some areas?
Well, let's be honest. Like, your discernment wasn't telling me something I didn't already have an inkling about. It was confirming it, but I didn't necessarily want to see it that way, right? So with that being said, it did take some time and it caused some arguments.
Yes.
And it caused some heated moments.
That's the part that I want them to understand.
Yes.
Like, this wasn't a, hey, do this. And
No.
then okay, husband.
Absolutely not.
Or, hey, do this. Yes, ma'am, wife. Like, it's not going to be like that. There's going to be friction and you're going to have to revisit the conversation.
Yeah. And in the end, like, I did realize, hey, you were right and your discernment is right. After I had done all of that bullheading, right? Because God opened my eyes to that and said, hey, this is not something healthy that you need to keep up in your marriage. That is when I did decide to let that go. And in the end, it did feel good and you felt relief, and it felt good to know that your partner also felt heard and your partner felt safe. But there were things that you didn't feel like I was safe in, and you also didn't feel safe. And I had to realize that and apologize for being so bullheaded that I didn't see that too.
Man,
What?
I just love you. Like, I'm always going to be protective over you.
So the last thing to just wrap everything up is just to make sure if you are not married that you practice how you play, because it is important. And if you don't practice how you play, then you will end up getting someone that is on the level of maturity or immaturity that you are at. And you will continue to attract that instead of attracting the person that you want. Check yourself. Check yourself before you get married. That way you ain't gotta check yourself so much to where you like, oh, dang, I'm kind of healed and you don't fit the healed version of me. Like, that's something that you don't want to happen. So do it while you're engaged, while you are dating. That way when you get in something, you know for sure this is the perfect fit.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
All right, y'all. That's another one in the books. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. As you can see, all of these episodes are scheduled out for your viewing. Set those reminders on your phone. Set your YouTube notifications, whatever you got to do. Those premieres are going to go live at 6 a.m. every Tuesday, and we'll have 3 shorts for you throughout the week. And we appreciate y'all for watching. We're on our way.
Bye.